Who's the best grass-type Pokemon in Pokemon Go? Is it Frenzy Plant Venusaur or Solar Beam Executor? Well, this is a clip from my live stream SwagTips where I explored just that. Not only comparing Executor and Venusaur, but Sceptile and Groudon in 7 different raid scenarios to find out who the grass-type attacking MVP is. The results may shock you! Man, Executor is the best. If Venusaur got Power Whip, it might be better than Executor. Well, now Venusaur has something better than Power Whip. It's got Frenzy Plant. So does this make it better than Executor? Well, that's where I spent most of my time making graphs, so let's get into that. So this graph is very similar to the last graphs I just showed you. These are the grass-type attackers compared, though. So we've got a Frenzy Plant Venusaur, that's the green line, a Solar Beam Venusaur, that's the yellow line, an Executor with Solar Beam, and that's the red line here. And then we've got Sceptile with Leaf Blade, and that's the blue line. And so they're being compared right now in a Tier 3 Aquatail Vaporeon raid. And what I found here was Solar Beam and Frenzy Plant doing about the same. Interesting thing about Pokebattler that you might be unaware of is Pokebattler simulations for a Tier 3 raid. You'd think that you're going mano-a-mano because you can solo this Vaporeon, but you're not. Pokebattler simulations for Tier 3 raids act as if you have a second fighter with you. So it kind of offsets the results, it kind of skews it. This is no longer a solo situation. And the reason why things are different is that the raid boss is getting energy much more quickly than it would if it was a solo, which means it's using charge moves a lot sooner than it would if it was a solo. And that kind of upsets the results. This is where the advantage of Go Battle Sim comes in. So I've got a Go Battle Sim graph, dare to compare. This is a single Executor, a single Venusaur, a single Sceptile team, right? Soloing the Tier 3 Aquatail Vaporeon. It is a solo. You don't have a second friend magically there with you, causing the energy to be different. And yeah, looking at that, there's a little bit more of a gap between Frenzy Plant, Venusaur, and Executor. So this would suggest that in this kind of non-aggressive situation that Venusaur is better. Well, what does this look like in performance? You know, this is just DPS. Well, what about TDO? So this is just gonna highlight another inaccuracy that Pokebattler has right now. Solandro changed how power is calculated. And for my graphs, usually I would do power divided by 6 to give you TDO for an individual Pokemon, because for whatever reason, Pokebattler has it where it's TDO times 6 because it's representing a party of 6, and that's how you get power. I don't know why it is that way. Well, Solandro recently changed the code. The way power is calculated now in Pokebattler, which is problematic for me and low-key problematic for probably a lot of people, is it caps the total damage output on time. If you didn't know that and you were to make a graph like this to see what the total damage output was like, you'd be like, okay, Frenzy Plant Venusaur and Executor, they're kind of similar, but Executor's got more total damage output going on. Well, in order to get the power that we used to have, you know, total damage output we used to have, you have to go into the simulations themselves, and then you have to take the HP of your attacker, and then you have to divide it by the HP spent, and then you multiply that by 100, and then that gives you the total damage output for the Pokemon, which is extremely annoying. But I did that because I wanted to get the TDO that I usually get for these graphs. And what I found when I was getting the OG stuff was that the results that I was using in the battle log, well, they weren't average. Each simulation I'd go through, it would like depend on where the final, you know, Venusaur or Executor ended up with their HP, and then that would skew what the total damage output would look like. So that was also very annoying. Well, fortunately, right, we got Go Battle Sim. Like, Pokebattler is not bad. I'm not dissing Pokebattler. I'm just saying that there's some things that it could improve upon, and there are some things that Go Battle Sim does better. And so this is a true solo 1v1, one trainer, one raid boss. You're using however many iterations of that single Pokemon to get to the victory. And yeah, what we're finding here is just shockingly different. And this is based off of 2,000 simulations averaged too. So This is like as real deal as it gets. Both Go Battle Sim and Pokebattler use the same Frenzy Plant, so it's not some ridiculously buff Frenzy Plant. It's just Venusaur is just smoking that Tier 3 Aqua Tail Vaporeon raid like none other. So I'd consider this to be overall a win for Venusaur. So this is against the Tier 5 Hydro Pump Kyogre raid using the Pokebattler simulations. And I call this an aggressive situation because it's using a Hydro Pump. You're going to get KO'd really quickly, so it kind of puts things in favor of not single bar charge moves. Kind of shocking, because if you look at this, you're like, well, Exeggutor is winning all the time. Exeggutor is still the red line, and is beating out everything else like crazy in this Hydro Pump fight for DPS. And you might be thinking, well, is this another problem with Pokebattler? No, not at all, actually. This is the Go Battle Sim one. Once again, Exeggutor is winning it out here. So it's not winning as much with the Pokebattler simulation, but I will say for this type of graph, this type of scenario, I would say that the Pokebattler graph is a little bit more accurate. And the reason why the Pokebattler graph is more accurate for this Tier 5 raid is because it has that phantom energy involved, where the Go Battle Sim right now doesn't have a way for me to separate attackers. And you're not going to fight a Tier 5 raid 1v1. Like, you can, but the results aren't going to be what you experience in a raid with multiple people. But because I can't separate the trainers, and I can't separate the Pokemon in the outputs from Go Battle Sim yet, Bioweapon said he's working on that, so soon, maybe, right? But because I couldn't separate them, I'd have to use the same Pokemon. So it was like 7 trainers all using Solar Beam Exeggutor going in the fight, and that way I can just divide the results by the amount of trainers. But because they're all using the same attack at the same time and they're all fainting at the same time, that's pretty unrealistic for what you'd actually experience in a raid. And for that reason, I'd say that the Pokebattler graph would be more accurate for that, because it uses the phantom energy for the DPS. And for the Tier 5 raids, since your team of 6 will faint before the time goes up on the raid, the power issue, the TDO issue I was having before, isn't present all the time. For Tier 5 raids, for like very low DPS, very high TDO Pokemon, it exists, and it shows up at random times, so it's very frustrating for me. But in Tier 5 raids, it exists a lot less, where it's like a huge central problem, in my opinion, for Tier 3 raids. But yeah, let's bring up the raid graph for this. Kyogre, Tier 5 raid, Hydro Pump set, no dodging involved, and yeah, you can see here, Exeggutor winning in the DPS. Frenzy Plant Venusaur has slightly higher TDO. I would say that the victory here goes to Exeggutor. It's against Hydro Pump though. And we know that Kyogre has, Blizzard and Thunder. So is it fair to just compare it to this Hydro Pump set? Well, let's see what it looks like against all movesets. And this is where we see Groudon stepping up, because Groudon is a great counter to Blizzard Kyogre, especially at level 40, which is what these simulations are, because it can actually survive a Blizzard, unlike these 3 Pokemon, right? And then the Thunder set, it's a ground type, so it's got that immunity to resistance, where the grass types just single resist it. But even then, with all these advantages posed to Groudon, all these reasons why you'd think Groudon would be better than Exeggutor, it appears that Exeggutor is still better. Sceptile's got some swag though. Yeah, it's the high DPS option. And the reason why Sceptile does so good in this raid is because it has the Leaf Blade. It's going to get off more Leaf Blades before it's succumbing to the Blizzard, which gives it a pretty nice advantage in DPS. Another raid that grass types kind of stand out in is against the Groudon fight. So this is against a Dragon Tail Solar Beam Groudon. Against the Solar Beam attack, specifically, Venusaur has this nice advantage in the fight with its Poison subtyping. Poison resists grass, and grass resists grass. So Venusaur in this fight gets an immunity to resistance to the Solar Beam, giving it a nice higher TDO. Go into all the movesets. So Solar Beam, Earthquake, and Fire Blast. Spicy. They're all having a pretty hard time here. Against all movesets, looks like Groudon's winning. And that's just because Groudon's not weak to Fire Blast. The Fire Blast hits, and all these faint. like we saw with the Kyogre raid, where if stuff's like dying right away, that's when Sceptile is standing the stronger. Like, yes, I got my Leaf Blades in while you guys stood around doing nothing. I'm Sceptile. So this raid hasn't come out yet. It was one of the raids that I did my predictive raid content for. We weren't sure if we were getting the Laddie twins or the Regicio. Turns out we got none. We got Lugia, right? Who saw that coming? So Regirock is a rock-type Pokemon. It's got the charge moves Stone Edge, Zap Cannon, and Focus Blast in the current Game Master. So, you know, a lot of moves that these grass types share resistances for, so I felt they'd be kind of even. But yeah, if you saw my predictive content though, then you already knew what was going to happen here. Yeah, freaking Groudon just swagging it. Because, I mean, charge move, Zap Cannon, immunity to resistance. Instant advantage, right? And then Stone Edge, believe it or not, ground types resist rock. It's not rock that resists rock, it's ground that resists rock. So, Groudon, resistance, right? So 2 resistances to the strongest attacks from the Regirock do a lot of favors for it. And another thing that Groudon has going on here, this is the Solar Beam set, mind you, but Regirock is also weak to ground, so it's weak to the Mud Shot. So that's an advantage that Groudon doesn't have in those water type and ground type raids that I just went through, because its fast move is ground, it's not grass. So it couldn't get those super effective hits in from the fast move. Well, it can here. So Groudon has every advantage in this Regirock fight. It is the MVP Super Swag King. If you want more details, then, I don't know, go on my YouTube and look for my predictive content on the Regirock. It goes over all 3 of the Regis. Pretty good video. So I'll let you know how to prepare for those raids. But then after that, Frenzy Plant Venusaur, right? Soarin' higher in TDO and DPS than Exeggutor. Sceptile actually does a little bit worse in this fight because Regirock uses Focus Blast. It is a fighting type attack. Poison resists fighting. Psychic resists fighting. Sceptile is pure grass last time I checked, and doesn't get any special resistances. So he's dying a lot sooner than usual, and these guys are getting more opportunities to show off. So Groudon has this advantage against the Stone Edge set, and it has an advantage against the Zap Cannon set that puts it well above the grass types. Well, what about the Focus Blast set, where the grass types have the advantage because of poison and psychic subtypings? Well, I got a graph for that. So yeah, even against Focus Blast, because Groudon is getting those super effective hits in with Mud Shot, it is the wiser. Another point for Groudon. But yeah, in a lot of these situations where Groudon is the winning Pokemon, if you put it simply to Venusaur and Exeggutor, it's like, Venusaur is right there. Like, yeah, okay, Groudon, you're a ground type. Get out of here with your Solar Beam. Yeah, looks like if Groudon is able to participate, Groudon wins. Well, what an upset. Didn't see that coming. You got the 2 Regirock raids here, and it's got the advantage in both of those. So is that, like, fair? And then I guess if we cut Groudon out of the picture, well, you got 2 points for Venusaur and 2 points for Exeggutor, but dialing it back in these 2 graphs here, the 2 Regirock raids, Venusaur was having an advantage over Exeggutor, so then that just transfers the points to Venusaur. So, sorry, Exeggutor. I think Venusaur with Frenzy Plant might just be the best grass-type Pokemon. So that was a clip from my live stream SwagTips where I went over who the best grass-type attacker is. If you're curious about the precise stats on Frenzy Plant versus Solar Beam, then check out that video. I'd say the general conclusion is that Venusaur is now the best grass-type attacker with Frenzy Plant. Now, does that mean you should try to run out and get 6 maxed out perfect IV Venusaurs tomorrow during the community day event? No, not exactly. If you checked out my History of Grass type video, which I linked below, you should probably check it out. The problem that grass types have right now in Pokemon Go, and will continue to have, is those water type raids against Vaporeon and Kyogre. What wasn't shown here was how much Raikou and Zapdos are beating them out. Against the Groudon raid, we don't have Kyogre, Gyarados, and the various dragon types beating them out on that graph. And when you look at the Regirock raid, you don't see how Kyogre, water types, and Machamp and Hariyama are compared to them. So, as far as grass types in an isolated grass type DPS environment goes, Venusaur is swagging, but grass types as a whole still have some massive competition from other Pokemon. With that said, for Community Day, I'm definitely going to aim to get 2 or 3 solid Frenzy Plant Venusaurs. As far as the average player goes, I'd say that's something reasonable to shoot for. I'd say anyone that gets at least 1 Frenzy Plant Venusaur will feel pretty good. But yeah, you don't really need to stock up and max out a whole bunch. Just like with Skytax Buff and Lugia, even though Frenzy Plant is currently projected to be the best charge move in Pokemon Go, the strongest one, it doesn't mean that Venusaur is going to all of a sudden be some super broke MVP better than everything else Pokemon. So keep that in mind and have some reasonable expectations for your Community Day tomorrow. I'm pumped for it. Gonna get me some Venusaur. It's gonna be great.